we were shooting that scene when we pulled the plug movie for the pandemic. And so I went home and I came back 9 months later and finished that scene for 2 days. So that was my, the beginning of that scene and the end are 9 months apart.
Step right up and behold one of the unexplained mysteries of the universe. Is he man or beast?
I think Clem, your character, really sets the mood on this movie about how humanity can go through a dark and a deep hole, right? So how was building this character? Was there any particular note that you wanted to add to him?
I just tried to enter that world in a non-self-conscious way and think about what kind of, justification Clem makes for some of the things that he does, how he feels about what he does. For example, when he tells the story about how to make a geek, he's sharing that as a kind of trade secret, but also there's a lot of feeling about what he's disgusted by, what he's pragmatic about, what he takes responsibility for, what he doesn't take responsibility for. You got to think about those things. What kind of man is willing to do this over and over and over again, to make a geek, basically to dehumanize a person? I would think that he wouldn't be responsible for that, because he would basically say, that's human nature. The guy's addicted. I'm just helping him along the way. I'm helping him to survive. Degradation that he goes through is really his responsibility. It's a little cold and a little dark that way. But also there's the sweet side of him where he takes care of his own. He tries to give people something, tries to give them some kind of twisted hope, some kind of diversion in a period where people are very fearful and insecure.
And it feels like Clem just chooses the kind of humanity, or the pieces of humanity, who wants to keep for himself, right?
That's a good expression. I think that's true. And I think for some people, that's exactly what they do. They take care of their own and they don't recognize the humanity in others. And that's their way. That justifies some really not so great behavior sometimes.
I think your character, which I love, because he's kind of full with dread and melancholy, and also he's kind of suspicious of everything around him. And I think his arc remembered me of the tale of Icarus. Was there something that you actually use as reference, like old stories for portraying him?
No, not really. I just tried to take it one step at a time, one scene at a time, one line at a time, and kind of see where it led me. It was certainly interesting to play. It was certainly interesting to do it with Bradley. If you tied me up and held a gun to my head and said, tell me who this character is before I started shooting, would be totally different than where it ended up.
Scenes which is portrayed with Toni Collette, I think with your character is the example of that, right? Like they kind of depend on each other, but they are kind of free. And I think that was a really kind of pure way to see love. And I love that. But also, Pete has also said, like he says that he has seen God's eyes and recognize himself as fraud. So how important do you think is for human beings to be able to have that capacity to recognize themselves as flawed?
Very important, because we all have flaws and we all try to hide them from ourselves and from others. What Guillermo is tapping into is that eventually you will have to reckon with them in some fashion. You had many choices along the way to deal with them. The sadness and the tragedy of this film, the darkness of this film, is that it takes so long for Stanton Carlyle to come face to face with himself. And like that last 2 minutes of the film is an extraordinary piece of filmmaking and acting. It exemplifies, it shows what can happen when you descend to such a level.
More so than many others, and he's the one that gets the warning to our main protagonist of the film. And I think that the outcast of the carnival may resemble us as outcast of the world during the pandemic. So how was having some time to deal with the world because you needed to shut down production before actually going and portraying it?
Very good observation. I came on after the when they started again, after the hiatus, when the first part was they had to shut down because of the pandemic. But I felt that, yes, that we were all kind of outcasts for a long time. We were all adrift. We were all feeling lost. And how do we answer this pandemic? How do we make sense of it? Where are our families? Where is our connection? The world seemed fractured and broken. There was a lot of that in Stanton Carlisle. He was lost. He was drifting. He was desperate. He was obviously broken inside and looking for some kind of at least acceptance, healing, something like that. And he comes to the carnival where it's a world of eccentric, bizarre, dangerous, sad, lost, magical people, much like our world. There's an infinite amount of personality there.
You're not thinking about that. You're living it. I had made a film before this with COVID protocols. It's possible to make movies this way. But it's a little hard on you because you're isolated. Your isolation is magnified because the only place you're in a city that you don't live in, you're usually in quarantine or you're isolated. And the only thing you're doing is going off to work in this carnival world. So that was quite kinky. So it allowed you to enter it in a very intense way, but also you were in a dark frame of mind because you're very isolated. And I remember also when we were shooting it was about October, November, and that was the period of the roll up to the US elections. And as an American citizen, I watched that very carefully. I also was isolated a lot, so I was watching the news a lot. Yeah, that didn't help matters.
It was like everything was...
That created a pretty dark view. I was ready to geek. I was ready to geek by then.
Well, it's interesting because I portrayed my character before the pandemic. I was on the scene, the lie detectors. We were shooting that scene when we pulled the plug movie for the pandemic. And so I went home and I came back 9 months later and finished that scene for 2 days. So that was my, the beginning of that scene and the end are 9 months apart.
Wow, it's incredible. Were you familiar with a 1946 novel?
I read it, yes, I did read it.
Okay, perfect. So was it something that drawn you to the script, or the script was something like beside?
I had seen the movie a long time ago. When Guillermo asked me to do it, I just read the script. I don't even think I remembered that I'd seen the movie. And I just read the script, and once I said, gosh, yes, Guillermo, thank you for asking me. Then I read the book, and I saw the movie again.
Not the novel, but I knew the movie. I had seen the movie, and then before I did it, I went back and watched the movie. But it's very different. And in fact, for example, the Clem character barely exists. And it's very, very cartoony and not so interesting in the original one. I mean, the original movie is interesting, but it's also a little creaky because I feel like it was a little bit of a polemic against alcoholism.
What is the most exciting thing of watching a movie in a movie theater?
Great question. Well, right now I feel the most exciting thing is to actually be in a movie theater with people.
Yes.
That's pretty exciting. And to be able to see a film like this, or any film for that matter, on a large screen, where you feel like you are actually being transported. And nobody does that better than Guillermo del Toro.
A movie theater, always, it's more exciting. It's what it's made for. I mean, it's made, the images are big. They're supposed to be big. It's when we saw this movie in a theater, my wife, when the lights came up, turned to me and she said, this is what I needed right now. This is what I needed. To sit in a darkened theater, get lost in a movie, and then when the lights come up, you're out of it. She just said, oh my gosh, I haven't had that feeling in so long.
I tell you many things. It's nice to go into a space with a bunch of strangers and watch some light on the screen and dream together. If you look at it that way, it's quite a beautiful and radical thing. When you watch things at home, it's not just the size of the screen. It's the fact that you can control. And to give over to an experience, to really enter it, you gotta submit. And if you can turn it off to do a phone call, or you can be cooking, or you can watch for a little while and know you can turn it off and watch some more later, you're not entering. When you watch things in a movie theater, you have to commit. It makes you much more open-hearted, much more open-minded, and makes you more fluid emotionally. Where if you're watching, there's a comfort to it because you don't have to slap to the theater and bup, 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 bup. You don't have the guy coughing next to you. You don't have the person rattling the popcorn, but you miss the kind of dream state that you can be in when you watch a movie. And dream state, I don't mean just as an illusion or escape. I mean a way where you can, you're more susceptible to take on an experience.
It's a cathartic experience. So thank you very much, Mr. Willem Dafoe. It's a pleasure talking with you. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Ciao.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Okay, great. Thanks. Appreciate it.
If you displease the right people, the world closes in on you very, very fast.